Welcome back. According to endgenocide.org, the Rohingya Muslim ethnic minority in Burma have been called, quote, the most oppressed people on earth. United Nations officials and independent human rights groups have reported evidence of direct state complicity in ethnic cleansing and severe human rights abuses. Who are the Rohingya and why is this happening to them? To help us answer these questions, we have in studio with us today Ahmed Ramadan, Outreach Coordinator for the Burma Taskforce. Let's hear what he has to say about the current situation of the Rohingya Muslims and what we can do about it. Welcome to the show, Ahmed.
Thank you for having me.
So why are we talking about Burma today?
Well, just to start, Burma is a country in Asia. It's located between Bangladesh and Thailand. We're worried about some of the human rights violations that are going on in the country. We're trying to raise awareness about that. So I appreciate you having me so we could talk about this today.
So tell me, who are they? So we're specifically talking about the Rohingya Muslims. So tell me a little bit about this group, because I understand this is a group that's being persecuted against.
Yes, so the Rohingya are an indigenous people living in their ancestral lands. In the past 60 years, they've been facing systematic persecution backed by the government. And in the past, since 2012, things have intensified. And just in the past couple of weeks, actually, it's taken a turn for the worse. So the Rohingya themselves, they're a Muslim minority. They make up about 4% of the population. So Burma, also known as Myanmar, has a population of between 55 and 60 million. The Muslims are about 1 million in there. Not most of them, but about 150,000 live in IDP camps, which are internally displaced person camps.
And these were created by who, the IDP camps?
They're actually created by the government. So when back in 2012, there was a report where 3 Rohingya men had raped and killed a Buddhist girl. Okay. Later on, these allegations turned out to be false, but because of that, riots happened, and there's been many reports that say this has been backed by the military and by the police, and a lot of the Rohingya were forced out of their homes, villages were burned down, and they ended up in these IDP camps where, you know, they're basically unable to move or unable to do anything. One of the big contributors to their downfall was in 1982, their citizenship was revoked, so they're actually stateless right now. And even though they've been there for generations, you can imagine how difficult it is, especially in a country like that when you're not a citizen, because you don't have access to proper work, you can't own land, you can't get married, you don't have access to education, your healthcare is very limited. So, you know, there's like 1 doctor for every 83,000 Rohingya, which is pretty difficult for people.
So do we know, like, what started? I know you talked about the incident in 2012. Is that sort of what led to this? But then you're talking about the fact that they're stateless at this point, and that dates back to the 80s. So did the Muslims do something? Like, why is this happening to the Rohingya Muslims in particular, or are there other minorities who are also on point? There
are other minorities that are being persecuted there. The Rohingya themselves, they're known as the most persecuted people on earth by the UN. That's what they were called by the UN. There have been studies by Yale University and by Queen's University considering what's going on with them, a genocide. So we could come back to specifically this point, but to answer your question, we're focused specifically on the Rohingya because they're getting persecuted the worst in Burma. So there are other ethnic minorities and religious minorities in there that are being, you know, persecuted, but you know, not as bad as the Rohingya. And that's why we're focused on them.
And do you think this is an issue that the Muslim community, it should be on the radar for the Muslim community, or is this something that you want the broader community to take note of and do something about it?
You know, I think any humanitarian or any human rights issues, I think the globe should care about, right? As humans, we need to care about other humans. So, you know, anytime that we see anybody being persecuted or wronged, we need to take a stand against it. And this is one of those cases where anybody and everybody should care.
Tell me a little bit, I know you're the outreach coordinator for the Burma Taskforce, so tell me a little bit about how that came about and what you're doing.
I'm doing something more for, you know, just take up a cause and try to help in any way that I can. And, you know, for me, there was an empty feeling that I wanted to fill. And eventually I made a decision that I wanted to move into an area where I could somehow benefit humanity, even if it was something small or big. And you know, sometimes a position comes or an opportunity comes and God provides it in a way that you don't even understand, and you end up somewhere that you're making a difference. So hopefully I'm able to do that.
So what are you doing with the Burma Taskforce? What's the work that you guys have been doing to date?
So the Burma Taskforce, we're focused on two main different aspects in work. One is we're trying to work with the government here in Canada. Canada's always been a human rights leader. They give money to other countries to support their human rights and advance democracy and people's liberty and dignity. So we're trying to work with them and create more awareness. I mean, they know what's going on in Burma, and you know, Burma's just moved into a democracy, so they're trying to support them with that. But at the same time, we don't want them to lose sight of the fact that the Rohingya are still being persecuted, and it's getting worse under the democracy, not better. So we want to make sure that they're aware of that. So that's one aspect of what the Burma Task Force does. The other side is we try to raise awareness in our communities. So we want people to know, because a lot of people don't know what's going on with the Rohingya and what's going on with Burma. And on face value, the fact that they've moved into a democracy is a feel-good story, really.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the work is done. There's actually a lot more work that needs to be done, and there are people that are still suffering and suffering really badly.
So even though now it's a democratic society, what you're saying is that the situation has not changed. So the Rohingya Muslims are still in concentration camps, and there are still human rights violations that are happening against them.
There are, and actually, in a sense, it's made it for them specifically worse, because the global community, before they moved into a democracy, had a more watchful eye about what's going on with the military regime that was in control. But now that, there's a Nobel Peace Prize winner that took control of she's the de facto leader, basically, Aung San Suu Kyi. She's really kind of like the darling of Myanmar, and people look at her in a very nice light. And, she's, for a major part, ignored the plight of the Rohingya. So even, the New York Times has written an article saying that she's basically ignored the Rohingya, and she's taken a cowardly stance on them, because she's kind of trying to keep the Buddhist majority happy. And this is one thing that also has made it more difficult, because people have a hard time believing that the Buddhists are extreme and they're the ones initiating the violence. And the matter of the fact is that we're not looking at the Buddhists as a religion. We're looking at it as anybody, when they're filled with extreme ideologies, and when it's backed by the government, they can basically skew to that direction.
Now I want to take you back a little bit. You mentioned that you are trying to reach out to the government. What has the response been to date with the Canadian government? Or have they been proactive? Are they doing anything?
Well, the Canadian government right now hasn't taken a firm stance yet. There are basically things that are going on right now in the background, and I guess they're setting up to make a statement soon. We're still waiting on that. But the matter of the fact is that no matter what they come out with right now, we want them to understand that there's an urgency. So we don't want them to take the stance that because they're in a democracy, we could sit back and let things unfold. There has to be sort of a more active and persistent effort on their part, talking to their counterparts in Burma, and making sure that the Rohingya are taken care of immediately.
You mentioned earlier, before we came on air, that there is actually a report that's incoming. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Canadian government has actually a subcommittee, a human rights subcommittee on the Rohingya. They've released a report not that long ago. The answer to the report by the House of Commons will come out very shortly. The report itself is pretty comprehensive, so it's something that we are satisfied with. It is missing a few key aspects in that report, and one being that we want to make sure that they're keeping an eye on Aung San Suu Kyi, who's kind of dismissed the Rohingya issue, saying it's not at the forefront, that it's being downplayed as a genocide, really, which is what it is. And any independent studies have shown that it is a genocide. I mean, governments cannot say it's a genocide, because, not that they can't say, but Once they say a genocide is happening, then it automatically means that the global community must intervene. So because of that, they're very careful on using the term genocide, but still ethnic cleansing terms have been used by governments and by the UN, or crimes against humanity has been used too. It's just a step below genocide, which forces them to have to do something about it.
So what can Canadians do?
Well, for us in Canada, it's important that we understand that as Canadians, we are kind of the leaders in human rights. So our government will, I believe, and have been working towards stepping up in this, stepping up for the Rohingya. But we need to let our government know also that we care about this issue. And if Canadians, what we're asking here today, and which is great why, for you having me here, is that we're asking the community to, one, pray for them. You know, we get these sort of campaigns that came out, which are great. Pray for Syria, pray for Aleppo, pray for you know, France when things were happening there. And we want people also to pray for the Rohingya. So that's one thing. We also want them to call their representatives. And you could tweet at them, you can call them, you can email them. Yeah, local MP, and also you could go directly to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. You know, whoever that you feel can make a difference. You know, they could email at Canada@burmamuslims.org, and we could let you know kind of the important figures that you can contact and let them know, voice their opinion on the issue. So that's the second thing, and obviously work like this takes money. So if people want to donate and help us out, you know, also you can contact at Canada@burmamuslims.org. So these are kind of the few things that we're asking people to do. And you know, you can get active on social media. We have a Facebook page. You could go on. You could read a little bit about the stories. Share it with the people that you know, in your community, in your family, your friends. Let people know, because I think a lot of people don't know, and awareness is, you know, kind of the first step for them to come out of their misery.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.